First-person perspective video games allow players to control their character through their point of view, as if they are the ones inside of the game. This makes players feel more immersed in the game as they see what the character sees and interact with the world within the video game differently in comparison to other game perspectives and genres. One common video game genre that revolves around this kind of perspective is first-person shooter video games. In games, the first-person perspective is not marginalized, but instead is commonly used to achieve an intuitive sense of effective motion. Over the years, first-person shooters have grown in popularity, where players around the world face off and compete against each other in online multiplayer game modes. Recent FPS video games focus on multiplayer team-based game modes, usually consisting of 3 to 6 players that revolves heavily around teamwork. In online team-based video games, players are usually given the choice between a set of roles, characters, or weapons to choose from in order to win against their opponents. There are patterns within online games where online players reported more interference with real-world socializing in conjunction with a greater development of online friendships. It is easier to make friends online since players interact with each other as teammates with similar interests as they meet each other playing the same online game. As with any kind of multiplayer game, there are instances where players can become tilted and toxic towards the opposing team as well as their teammates. One example of this toxic behavior is the historical teabag, where a player would purposely crouch up and down on their opponent's body after killing or eliminating them. This action tends to tilt other players because players often do this to purposely troll and disrespect their opponents or even their teammates. Player communities can vary in amounts of toxicity, but the online team-based multiplayer communities are definitely no strangers to this behavior, since gameplay requires an increased amount of communication as well as dependency on teammates compared to other genres. The topic I plan to research is understanding the endless toxicity that comes from this video game genre and its effects on the community as well as new players. In addition, I plan to provide a close analysis of the two games known as Overwatch and Valorant, the core mechanics of these games, industry practices, and the actions as well as practices of the player communities. Though the communities can be toxic, what makes this gaming genre one of the best in my opinion is the endless possibilities of team compositions that can be formed when people with different playstyles are put together. The first topic is a close analysis of the two games Valorant and Overwatch. Overwatch is a 6v6 team-based first-person shooter that was released in 2016, where players can choose from 32 playable characters in the different roles with their own abilities. The game mode that is chosen for the match depends on the map that is randomly selected for the game. Some examples of game modes in Overwatch are Control, Assault, Escort, and Hybrid. In Control maps, teams fight to hold a single objective. The first team to win 2 rounds wins the map. In Assault game modes, attackers fight to capture a series of objectives, and defenders hold them off until the time runs out. For Escort, attackers escort a payload to a delivery point while defenders try to stop them. And finally, for Hybrid game modes, attackers capture a payload, then escort it to its destination while defenders try to stop the attackers. In addition, players can choose from various categories of these game modes in Quick Play, Competitive, and Arcade. Quick Play is a standard category where players can join into any game and play casually. Players can also join mid-game as well, which is super helpful if you are down a teammate after they leave purposely or get disconnected from the game. Competitive is where the stakes are higher, as 2 teams in similar ranks battle against each other in order to gain SR to rank up. Players gain SR by winning or tying with their opponent's score, and can become part of the top 500 rank in their region. Arcade contains different game modes. Players can play freely and is meant for more casual play, as well as limited time event game modes such as Overwatch Archives. In this game mode, players can play story mode and team missions that are part of the lore and backstory behind the game. Valorant is a free-to-play 5v5 character-based first-person shooter that was released in 2020 and is meant for a more tactical style of gameplay in comparison to Overwatch. In Valorant, there are 3 different game modes players have the option to choose from. Standard plant/defuse. Players rotate between attacking and defending, and the first team to win 13 rounds wins the entire game. In Spike Rush, players are given random weapons and power-up orbs around the map at the start of each round, and the first team to reach 4 wins. In Deathmatch, it's a free-for-all where players can use any weapon of their choice, but cannot use any of their abilities, no matter what character they choose. Similar to Overwatch, Valorant has 2 different categories of play, known as unrated and comp, where players can choose from a more casual type of play to a higher stake and serious type of play for progressing through the ranks. However, if players leave mid-match, the game still goes on and someone else can't join to substitute the player that left. When playing Valorant, games can run up to 45 minutes to an hour depending on how intense the game is, with both teams scoring the same amount of points. In competitive modes for both games, there is also overtime that can occur when both teams secure the same amount of objectives or win the same amount of rounds. This makes gameplay even more intense, but interesting because tying its score proves that both teams have an equal amount of skill and drive to win. Players' attitudes towards playing and winning can be different depending on the game mode they choose to play, but the majority of them involve the cooperation of their teammates. At the start of both Valorant and Overwatch, players have the choice between a variety of different roles as well as characters. In both games, every character has their own unique kit of abilities used for offensive or defensive purposes, as well as an ultimate. The abilities and ultimates players have access to depends on their role and character they choose to play. Agents in Valorant are separated into 4 different roles, which are duelists, sentinels, initiators, and controllers. Duelists are known to be the entry fraggers with offensive abilities in order to be aggressive and are the first ones to push for their team. Since this role is meant for mainly aggressive plays, they are believed to be the characters with the highest amount of kills on their team. Jett, for example, is one of my favorite duelists, where she can throw quick smokes to block their enemy and has a dash that is perfect for being aggressive as well as getting out of sticky situations. Sentinels are more on the defensive side and passive playstyles with ability kits that help lock down a bomb site from attackers, slow down the enemy team in order for their team to regroup and retake the site. Killjoy is a Sentinel in Valorant who has a bunch of utility such as a turret and alarm bot that can be used to detect enemies and alert her team of where they are in order to retake the site. Initiators are meant for recon and gathering information for their team, while also specializing in crowd control. Sova is an example of a recon initiator, where he has a sonic arrow he can shoot which scans enemies within its radius, and also has a drone that is perfect for spotting the movements of the enemies. Controllers control the battlefield through the use of smokes or walls that block line of sight in certain parts of the map for their team to gain the advantage. The agent Brimstone has abilities where he can throw up to 3 smokes for blocking sights of enemy players, as well as a Molotov he can use to cut off and damage enemies caught in it. Opposed to Valorant and Overwatch, there are 3 roles that players can play from, known as tank, damage, and support. Tanks are characters with large health, shield, and armor pools and are the front line for their team, soaking up any incoming damage and allowing their team to push. Tanks like Reinhardt have abilities such as his barrier that is used to protect the team from any incoming damage for a limited amount of time, allowing his team to push in or defend without dying in the process. Damage heroes, also known as DPS, specialize in dealing large amounts of damage and getting eliminations to constantly put pressure on the enemy team, securing objectives. Genji is a DPS hero who can prioritize getting eliminations for his team by harassing the enemy's team backline and picking off their supports. Finally, the last role is support, and the support role is known as the heroes who can heal their team, allowing them to survive teamfights, heal any damage taken, and even survive high damaging ultimates. Lucio is an example of a hero in the support role who heals his team within his area of effect and can also provide a speed boost for getting to objectives. His ultimate also provides a massive shield buff to all players within his radius, which is perfect for surviving high damage. The main basis behind ultimates and within Overwatch is to deal high amounts of damage, crowd control, and countering other ultimates to keep your team alive in teamfights. Players have to logically use characters' abilities to gain the advantage during gameplay, and these ultimates can turn the tides of any game. The perceived interactivity of video gamers compared with the passivity of media such as television, but the assertion is often made that video gamers are players of the game rather than an audience of media, as stated in Video Gamers. What makes these games popular is the diverse amount of roles players can choose from that can benefit their team no matter who they choose to play. Yes, it's believed that some characters in Valorant and Overwatch are more popular than others and are believed to be part of the current meta, but everyone plays their own part in playing the game rather than being spectators or viewers. Another unique mechanic that Overwatch has is play of the game, where at the end of the game, the most highlighted influential clip of a match is replayed, which usually consists of multi-eliminations using ultimates or saving the entire team. Valorant has a similar mechanic to games like CSGO, which is a buy system where players use money gained within the rounds to buy better guns and abilities. Players first start off with a certain amount of credits that only allows them to use pistols or buy only a certain amount of abilities to use in the beginning. In order to gain more credits to purchase more utility and better weapons, players can win rounds, get eliminations, and plant or defuse the spike. Players can keep track of the amount of money the opposing team has to predict what they are able to buy for the round. Both games also rely heavily on the use of sound, since there are always audio cues when players use abilities and ultimates that can give away their location and make them an easy target to counter. In addition, like almost every multiplayer game, Valorant and Overwatch allows players to communicate with each other in order to win. When playing, it is helpful to provide your teammates with callouts, whether it be the location of the enemy or what abilities they have used. For communication, Valorant also has a ping system where if players don't have a mic or can't use team chat, they allow pings within the map to show the location of the enemy or request help for their team. Possibly the most important key factor behind winning in a multiplayer game is having some form of communication in order to spread information with their teammates and have a higher chance of defeating the opposing team. The third topic is studying industry practices. Though not as much as other genres, such as fighting games, a player can still witness the over-sexualization of female characters, making them unrealistic to women players in society. In these video games, there are some female characters who are overly sexualized, since men are usually the target audience and player base when it comes to FPSs. Some of the women character designs can be viewed as a bit too sexualized when it shouldn't be the case. In Overwatch, majority of the characters are designed with futuristic armor and cybernetic features. However, the DPS character known as Widowmaker is a prime example of the common overly sexualized female character. Her default design features her in a skin-tight suit showcasing her cleavage and the typical false body figure. Many female gamers have pointed out and reacted to multiple cases of hypersexualization within FPS games as well as other game genres. However, it is still pretty common to have at least one character that falls into this false generalization of what women in society are like. The developers of Overwatch stated how they want their game to be a safe space and represent everyone equally, but still fall under the category of appealing to the false male image of women. One positive practice when it comes to multiplayer video game industries is providing more representations for all content players. We live in a varied, confusing, wonderfully diverse world full of countless individuals with unique stories, and yet for a long time that hasn't been reflected in our fictional world or fictional narratives, as stated in Diversity in the Games Industries and How to Cultivate Inclusion. There is a growing representation of members of the LGBTQ community within these video games in comparison to previous FPS titles. In Overwatch, the main character on the cover, known as Tracer, as well as other characters, were confirmed to be members of this community, allowing players to see themselves become more represented within the game and enjoy playing even more. However, when the character Soldier 76 was confirmed to be part of the queer community, There was a large amount of backlash received because they believe he is no longer the strong, straight, white male character he used to be, which isn't the case. Other players often believe that representation of LGBTQ characters in games is usually a tactic used by video game companies to attract more players and gain more profit for their game, when it's actually a positive thing, inspiring the representation of all members of society and not just men. Regardless of public opinion, after many years of games and other media dominated by the tale of the white, cisgendered, heterosexual, neurotypical, able-bodied male protagonist, games are beginning to include a wider range of people. In 2019, Blizzard Entertainment, the studio behind Overwatch, as well as other popular games such as Hearthstone and World of Warcraft, received backlash on banning players supposedly due to supporting the protests that were occurring in Hong Kong at the time, stating how their choice in banning the players wasn't linked to the protests, but didn't speak on behalf of this until it directly affected the profit that they were earning. Hearing the delayed response of the reasoning behind banning players sparked an outrage within the player and fan base, as Overwatch features characters such as Mei from Asian descent, but treats part of their players unequally based on a social cause. Valorant and Overwatch also have a variety of microtransactions where players are able to purchase weapon skins or loot boxes in order to get cosmetics. I, for one, caved in and spent money on microtransactions in these games due to limited time events and releases that came out in both games. There is a positive to spending money on specifically free games such as Valorant on skins, because they actually support the artists behind the design of the weapon skins and appreciate their work put into it. The final topic is studying player communities and practices. Multiplayer games can allow a widely varying amount of interaction among the players. This amount of interaction will lead to critical differences in many aspects of play. These video game communities are known to be somewhat toxic because these video games force players to rely on teammates to win, which can lead to trolling as well as purposely throwing. There are instances where if someone's character is taken, they either go AFK the whole game or decide to sabotage the game for everyone else. This happens a lot in these type of games, as some characters are more popular than others due to their kit and are used by pro players. That's why for any team-based multiplayer game, I recommend knowing how to play more than just one character, because you aren't always going to be able to play that same character every single game. Since these games are online, you are always playing with other players around the world, and there is a voice as well as text chat in order to communicate with team members and even the enemy team. With this online feature, where players are purposely toxic, sexist, and racist towards other players because they feel like they are protected behind the screen of the game. Even today, there are still matches where if there is a woman playing, for example, they face backlash with sexist comments from their teammates and face stereotype of girls being bad at video games, when that isn't the case. Another major practice within the online multiplayer community is what's known as backseat gaming. Backseat gaming is normally when someone is watching or spectating another player and telling the player what to do and play the game for that person who is trying to play. Both the Overwatch and Valorant communities have cases where players backseat game, and it's especially common in the competitive game modes since the stakes are higher for winning. The most consistent phrase used by backseaters is commanding someone to use their abilities or ultimates and bashing them for not using them their way. No one likes when someone else constantly commentates what they should do in a game, and can make playing extremely stressful and less enjoyable. Overall, there really is no guaranteed way to avoid toxicity in the online community, but luckily, every game includes the ability to mute and report anyone in-game that is being toxic towards you or others. There's always going to be at least one troll you encounter online, but it's better to just enjoy playing the game as much as you can and reporting or muting them. Studying what goes on in these communities and representations of all players is important in spreading awareness of the negative effects on players, as well as supporting the cause of making any video game space a safe place.